Hi, good morning. You're watching the Breakfast News on Rajya Sabha Television. I'm Ashwarya Kapoor with you. Let us start the news bulletin with the headlines. Hectic campaigning on ahead of Chhattisgarh's first phase of polls on the 12th. Prime Minister Modi to address rally in Naxal-affected Jagdalpur. Rahul Gandhi to address public meetings in Bastar and Rajnandgaon districts. Last date for filing nominations in Madhya Pradesh and Mizoram Assembly polls. Election Commission's team in Mizoram today to resolve standoff on the CEO issue. Vice President M. Venkaiah Naidu to embark on a 3-day state visit to France today will represent India at the armistice of a World War I centenary commemoration to also unveil Indian Armed Forces Memorial in Paris. Indian Army set to formally induct 2 different howitzers artillery gun systems. Defence Minister Nirmala Sitharaman to be present at the School of Artillery near Nasik in Maharashtra today for the induction ceremonies of ultra-light howitzer M77 and self-propelled K9 Vajra. Russia to host international talks on Afghanistan with representatives of Afghan government and the Taliban. India to participate at the non-official level. Russia had in August proposed hosting multilateral peace talks. And Indian shuttlers' a good run in China Open Badminton Tournament continues. PV Sindhu, K. Srikanth enter quarterfinals. Indian women cricket team to launch its bid for a maiden women's World T20 title with a tough opener against New Zealand. Let's first get you all the election-related news. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Congress President Rahul Gandhi will hold rallies in Chhattisgarh today to campaign for the first phase of the assembly elections in the state. Prime Minister Modi is scheduled to hold rallies in Bastar districts at Jagdalpur and Raipur, while Rahul Gandhi will tour the state for 2 days, during which he is slated to address 5 rallies and also hold a roadshow in Chief Minister Raman Singh's constituency, Rajnandgaon. Raman Singh is also scheduled to hold a roadshow in Rajnandgaon today evening. He is pitted against the Congress's Karuna Shukla, niece of late Prime Minister Atal Bihari Vajpayee. The campaigning for the first phase will end tomorrow. A total of 1,291 candidates are in the fray for the 2-phased state polls. The first phase on 12th of November will see 18 seats of 8 Maoist-affected districts go to the polls, and the remaining 72 constituencies will go to polls on 20th of November, and the counting of votes will be held on 11th of December. And news from poll-bound Madhya Pradesh. The Congress released its final list for the assembly polls in BJP-ruled Madhya Pradesh, nominating its OBC phase Arun Yadav against Chief Minister Shivraj Singh Chauhan in Budni district in Sihor district. The BJP also announced its 4th and final list of 7 candidates for the polls. The Congress left 1 seat, Jatara, for its ally LJD. The LJD might field Vikram Chaudhary from the area. And Arun Yadav will file his nomination papers today. With the final list, Congress has declared candidates for 229 out of 230 seats, while Shivraj Singh Chauhan will be contesting from Budni seat, from where he has been elected thrice in a row. The BJP also nominated a woman candidate, Fatima Rasool, against Congress's sitting MLA Arif Aqil from Bhopal North. BJP has announced its candidates for all the 230 seats in the state. News from poll-bound Mizoram, where the Election Commission on Thursday rejected a plea of the BJP to extend the last date for filing nominations for the 28th of November assembly polls in the state. The party had moved the plea, citing the law and order situation in the state, as today is the last date for filing of nominations. Mizoram Chief Minister filed nominations to contest the 28th of November state polls from Champhai North and Sarship assembly seats. So far, about 95 candidates have filed nominations across the state. The filing of nominations for the assembly elections in Madhya Pradesh also ends today. A total of 593 nominations have been filed so far to the 28th of November elections, and scrutiny of nominations will be happening on 12th of November, while 14th of November is the last day for the withdrawal of candidature. Polling in both the states will take place on 28th of November. Meanwhile, a high-level team of Election Commission will visit Mizoram today. The team will be headed by Deputy Election Commissioner Sudeep Jain and will hold further discussions with state government officials and the leaders of the NGO Coordination Committee on the current standoff in the state. Meanwhile, the standoff caused due to protests by the NGO Coordination Committee ended after the NGOs called off their agitation. Remember, for the past 2 days, the NGO Coordination Committee, led by YMA, was protesting against the removal of Principal Secretary Lar Niva Chunago, and they were demanding the removal of Chief Electoral Officer SP Shashank. Let's get you some other news now. The Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs on Thursday approved a strategic disinvestment of 100% Government of India's equity in the Dredging Corporation of India. In some other key decisions, Cabinet gave in-principle approval for operation, management and development of Jaipur, Lucknow, Thiruvananthapuram, Guwahati, Ahmedabad and Mangaluru airports on public-private partnership model. The Cabinet approved the amendment to the Central Universities Act 2009 as well for setting up of a Central Tribal University in Andhra Pradesh. It also gave an in-principle approval for the sale of enemy shares under the custody of Ministry of Home Affairs, custodian of enemy property of India, and the Cabinet approved the signing and ratifying the extradition agreement between India and Morocco, which will provide a legal base for the extradition of fugitive offenders accused of economic offences, terrorism and other serious offences.
There are clearly 4 reform measures taken to strengthen infrastructure, to strengthen economy. The first is disinvestment of Dredging Corporation of India. The second is 6 airport. The third is enemy property shares. And the fourth is inviting foreign oil companies to help India's strategic oil reserves by investment.
And Vice President Venkaiah Naidu will embark on a state visit to France today to take part in the centenary celebrations to the First World War in Paris ending. He will attend the opening ceremony of the Paris Peace Forum. The event is being attended by about 50 heads of state or government at the culminating ceremony on 11th of November. On the first day of his visit, he is slated to address the Indian diaspora at a reception hosted by the ambassador. On 10th of November, he will unveil the Indian Armed Forces Memorial. And on 11th of November, Vice President Naidu is slated to attend a ceremony to commemorate the armistice of the First World War, presided over by French President Emmanuel Macron. Vice President Naidu will return to New Delhi on 12th of November. Indians settled abroad also contributed to the freedom struggles of many countries. One such Indian was Kantibai Govindbhai Patel, who played a key role in Zimbabwe's independence movement. Vice President Venkaiah Naidu visited National Heroes Acre in the recent Africa tour, and he paid tributes to the martyrs of Zimbabwe Liberation War. The Vice President described Patel as a true patriot. Take a look at this report.
Vice President Venkaiah Naidu visited National Heroes Acre, a national monument in Zimbabwe's capital Harare, in his visit to the nation last week. The 57-acre site is on a ridge 7 kilometers from Harare towards Norton. It honors tens of thousands of national heroes who sacrificed their lives to free Zimbabwe. Among the heroes are an Indian origin revolutionary, Kantebhai Govardhanbhai Patel. Patel contributed immensely in Zimbabwe's War of Liberation. Patel was born on October 28, 1928 in Dharmach town of Gujarat to a peasant family. He did his primary and secondary education at Dharmach and a Bachelor of Arts at the University of Bombay. He came to Zimbabwe in 1961 and became involved in liberation activities. He first joined Zimbabwe African People's Union and later Zimbabwe African National Union Patriotic Front. Patel was elected to ZANU PF Politburo in 2004 and held a number of parliamentary offices as well.
Kantebhai Govardhanbhai Patel, who migrated here in 1961, settled here, made a humble beginning as a small trader, but expanded his activity. Later, on seeing the colonial oppression, he joined the movement and then he became an active participant. They told me, the foreign minister told me, that he not only gave shelter to the underground guerrillas during the struggle, but also gave them information and also financial assistance as and when required. And they have erected a memorial for him with his photo, and I was there to visit the tomb and then offer tribute.
In 1980, the country gained official independence as Zimbabwe. Earlier it was known as Rhodesia. In 1985, President Mugabe, then Prime Minister, appointed him senator, and 5 years later a non-constituency member of parliament. In 2005, he was appointed to the Senate. After Patel's death in 2011, the government of Zimbabwe built his tomb in Heroes Acres in 2012. Pancharan Mishra's report for Rajya Sabha TV.
And in Breakfast News, we'll take a very short break here. We'll be right back with more news. Don't go anywhere.
But first up, the topic of air cargo policy.
We have a long way to go. The potential is there. How well we harvest this is a key challenge.
We are also trying to leverage the air service agreements, which have typically been used for passenger movements. So we would like to see how we can propel cargo movement as well through these.
Now we'll take a closer look at the revised CBSE affiliation bylaws.
Every developed country has got a developed education system where focus has been on qualitative improvement. So how I understand these new bylaws is from a quantitative check. We are starting to talk about a qualitative check.
The teachers, when they come to the school, they come from various backgrounds. So it's important for the teachers to unlearn and relearn.
Welcome back after the break. On the second anniversary of the note ban exercise in 2016, Finance Minister Arun Jaitley said that it resulted in increasing the tax base, formalization of the Indian economy and prompting the government to earmark more resources for the poor and infrastructure development. The opposition parties, however, insisted that it was an ill-advised step.
On the second anniversary of the demonetization decision of the government, Finance Minister Arun Jaitley said the move resulted in formalization of the economy and increased the country's tax base. This, he said, helped the government to earmark more resources for the poor and infrastructure development.
Today, we've completed 2 years after the Prime Minister announced the historic step of demonetization of the high-value currency. Obviously, it was required because high-value currency occupied almost 86% of India's cash currency. India was predominantly a cash-dominated economy. And a cash-dominated economy suffers from many challenges. cash has anonymity. Its owner is not known to the system. Therefore, it prevents a formalization of the economy. Cash evades taxes, the result of which was that India's taxation base, both in direct taxes and indirect taxes, was very narrow. Cash goes directly opposite to the global trend of digitization of financial transactions. So transactions take place outside the banking system. And it's a cumbersome process to handle. It encourages black money.
Finance Minister said the criticism that almost the entire cash money got deposited in the banks post-demonetization is ill-informed. He clarified confiscation of currency was not the objective of demonetization. Instead, the decision was taken to usher in the formal economy and make holders of money pay tax. He asserted that in the first 4 years of the NDA government, the number of people filing income tax returns has gone up from 3.8 crore in May 2014 to 6.86 crore.
Demonetization was a key step. You had anonymous amount of cash currency operating in the system, mainly through high value currency. People were compelled to make deposits. Our object was not to confiscate their resources or money, but to find out who is keeping an illegitimate non-tax paid money. Deposit in the banks ended the anonymity of this money. Its owner got identified. And about close to 18 lakh such assessees whose deposits were disproportionate to their declared income were identified.
In a blog post on Facebook, the Finance Minister explained the impact of demonetization on personal income tax. He wrote, personal income tax collections were higher in financial year 2018-19 till 31st October 2018 compared to the previous year by 20.2%. Even in the corporate tax, the collections have been 19.5% higher. From 2 years prior to demonetization, direct tax collections have increased 6.6% and 9% respectively. In the next 2 years post-demonetization, the increase was 14.6%, part of the year before impact of demonetization in 2016-17, and an increase of 18% in the year 2017-18, wrote Arun Jaitley. The Finance Minister further said the system needed to be shaken up in order to make India move from cash to digital transactions. Post-demonetization, the impact on government's digital transaction initiative UPI was noticeable as it saw a significant jump, with transactions growing from 0.5 billion in October 2016 to 598 billion in September 2018. UPI was launched in 2016, involving real-time payments between two sets of mobile holders. According to Arun Jaitley, the share of indigenously developed payment system of Unified Payments Interface and RuPay card have reached 65% of the payments done through debit and credit cards. The value of Bhim transactions also went up significantly post-demonetization, thereby giving a fillip to government's efforts to expand the digital payment space, wrote the Finance Minister. Bhim is currently used by 1.25 crore people. The value of Bhim transactions has gone up from 0.2 billion in September 2016 to 70.6 billion in September 2018. The share of Bhim transactions in overall UPI transactions was at about 48% in June 2017.
Once monies went into the banks because of this step, immediately the deposits in the mutual funds increased, because these were then deposited by people into the mutual funds, which was used for more productive areas of the economy. And this helped the whole system in generating economic activity.
While the Finance Minister highlighted the benefits of the note ban move, former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh described it as an ill-fated and ill-thought exercise. In a statement, the senior Congress leader said the havoc unleashed by demonetization on the Indian economy as well as the society is now evident to everyone. Former Finance Minister P. Chidambaram called the note ban exercise a money laundering scheme.
Today is November 8, the second anniversary of the infamous demonetization. As you have reported in the past, none of the three objectives declared by the Prime Minister on November 8, 2016 was achieved. Demonetization did not put an end to generation or use of black money.
However, the World Bank had said in April that the Indian economy appeared to have recovered from the temporary disruptions caused by demonetization and the introduction of the GST. The World Bank had said the country was projected to grow by 7.3% in 2018 and 7.5% in 2019, but pointed out that despite growth, India was not creating enough jobs. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
On to the other top story this morning. The Indian Army is set to formally induct a K9 Vajra and M777 howitzer guns today at a ceremony to be attended by Defence Minister Nirmala Sitharaman at a school of artillery near Nashik in Maharashtra. Induction of 100 K9 Vajra at a cost of 4,366 crore rupees is to be completed by November 2020. The first regiment of K9 Vajra, first ever artillery gun manufactured by the Indian private sector, is expected to be completed by July 2019. The Army is also going to raise 7 regiments of 145 M777 howitzers. 5 guns each will be delivered to the Army beginning August 2019, and the entire process will be completed in the next 24 months. The first regiment will be completed by October next year. Let's get to some international news. India on Thursday said that it will participate at a non-official level in the meeting being hosted by Russia on Afghanistan, where representatives of the Taliban will be present. The Moscow format meeting on Afghanistan will be held today, and representatives of both the Afghan government and the Afghan Taliban radical groups will take part in it. In response to the queries regarding India's participation in the meeting, Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson Ravish Kumar said that India is aware of that meeting, and it clarified that India's participation will be only at the non-official level. He further added that India supports all efforts at peace and reconciliation in Afghanistan that will preserve unity and plurality and bring security, stability and prosperity to that country. And Bangladesh will hold its general election on 23rd of December. The country's electoral body announced this on Thursday amid an impasse between the government and the main opposition alliance over the timing of the polls. It will also be the first time that the electronic voting machines will be used on a limited scale. The announcement came amid the calls from the newly floated National Unity Front to defer the election schedule, while the ruling Awami League that urged the commission to stick to its plan. The candidates have to submit their nomination papers by 19th of November, and the nomination papers will be scrutinized till 22nd of November. Big story coming in from the United States, where a former U.S. Marine combat veteran killed at least 12 people after he opened fire in a California county music bar packed with college students. The gunman, identified by police as Ian David Long, was found dead of an apparently self-inflicted gunshot wound following the massacre. Meanwhile, FBI's assistant director in charge of Los Angeles said that it was too early to speculate on the shooter's motives, but he appears to have acted alone. All the sporting action now in ICC's Women's World T20 will kickstart from today in the West Indies, and the Indian women team will kickstart its campaign against New Zealand in Guyana today. The women team, led by skipper Harmanpreet Singh, will be dependent on their solid batting lineup comprising of captain herself along with Mithali Raj and Smriti Mandhana to give them a solid start in the tournament. Meanwhile, the hosts and defending champions of West Indies will begin their campaign against Bangladesh. Meanwhile, England are hoping for a repeat of 2009 when they won the inaugural competition. Also, 3-time winners Australia remain strong, while South Africa will also fancy their chances. News from the world of badminton. Ace Indian shuttler PV Sindhu and Kidambi Srikanth will face their respective opponents in the quarter-finals of the China Open Badminton today. In the women's singles, PV Sindhu will face China's He Bingjiao in her quarter-final bout. Earlier, she had defeated Buchanan of Thailand 21-12, 21-15 in the pre-quarter-finals. And in the men's singles, Srikanth will face Taiwan's Chao Tien Chen in the quarter-final. He had defeated Tommy Sugata of Indonesia in the pre-quarter-final stage. And in the men's doubles, Indian duo of Chirag Shetty and Satvik Sairaj Rankireddy entered the quarter-final stage after defeating Indonesian pair of Ade Yusuf and Wahyu Nayaka in the pre-quarter-finals. They will face another Indonesian pair in the quarter-finals today. And that's it from me and my team in this edition of Breakfast News. But news and updates continue on your channel. Thanks for watching.